Hey everyone, welcome back to Installation 00, and today we continue the second part of our two-part series looking into the ODST's equipment and whether or not that's possible with modern technology. In our previous episode we looked at the SOEV drop pod and the materials and technology that goes into building one, and came to the conclusion that an ODST drop pod is absolutely possible with modern technology. And in saying that, it's not at all surprising given that we already have much of the technologies that would be required to create a drop pod currently in existence and employment with many space programs across the world at the moment. But I'm sure you agree, we don't have many troops on the front line wearing armour quite like the ODSTs. And not just the armour itself, but the systems contained within it and how multi-purpose the ODST armour just so happens to be. A most detailed breakdown of the ODST BDU is in the description down below alongside episode 1 of this two-part series. So ultimately, let's take a closer look at the major components of the ODST BDU and decide whether or not the technology that we currently have available in our modern society is capable of producing something close to, if not identical to, the ODST armour. Alongside, of course, an exciting announcement to be made as well towards the end of the video. The ODST body armour is just a really cool body armour that we see in extensive use across the Halo universe, and it's evidently resonated with people because it also just so happens to be one of the most used armours for cosplay purposes. In the lore, the ODST armour provides protection to the individual wearing it from the heat of re-entry while inside of a drop pod, as well as heat from plasma weapons and ballistic projectiles, while still ensuring full mobility and practicality on the battlefield. While at face value it just appears to be a suit of body armour, it in fact goes a lot deeper than that with its situational awareness systems that enable the individual wearing the suit to have a full understanding of what's going on around them in what would otherwise be an extremely chaotic theatre of war. And indeed, this suit of armour goes a significant step further than even our most cutting-edge body armours that are used in wide deployment by our brave men and women on the front lines. So above all else, this armour needs to protect the individual. So let's have a look at the ballistic properties of the ODST armour. The hard armour plating of the ODST armour are made from titanium and ceramic composites. This means that they're extraordinarily lightweight but also extremely capable of stopping a large array of caliber of ballistic projectiles, as well as having a coating to deal with the heat of re-entry and the heat of plasma and energy-based weapons. Do we have anything out there at the moment that is anywhere near similar to this? The simple answer is yes. The long answer is titanium is already used in some capacity as armour. Titanium grade 38, otherwise known as armour grade titanium, is exactly that permutation. I've referenced him many times before and I'll reference him once again. The YouTube channel Demolition Ranch did some ballistic testing against a block of titanium. The plate itself was about 1 inch to 1.5 inches in thickness and could take everything up to and including a 50 caliber BMG black tip. The only immediate issue that I see with putting a suit of titanium armour on is that even though titanium is about half the weight of steel, it's still prohibitively heavy. And we see ODSTs running and sprinting and punching and fighting as if completely unencumbered by this armour. This leads to the logical conclusion that titanium is only used on particular plates that are of mortal concern, e.g. the plate on the chest and perhaps some panels within the helmet are probably titanium panels to help deal with incoming projectiles, allowing softer or composite armours to deal with projectiles to less vital organs and extremities of the body. Even so, with the weight involved, it would still require some degree of a support structure inside to help bear that weight and channel it directly into the ground, but the second you do that, you've still got the inertia of the armour itself to deal with. This could be counteracted in some degree with a passive support structure. This support structure would channel the weight of the armour itself directly into the ground, but rather than being powered by electro servos or artificial muscles, it would be passively powered by spring servos, sealed pneumatic pistons, or simply spring-loaded or elasticated cartridges. This passive power, or semi-power so to speak, would be just sufficient to counteract the inertia of the armour plates themselves while also simultaneously channeling the weight of the armour into the ground, meaning the wearer wouldn't really feel the weight and inertia of the armour plates themselves. As far as other armor plates across the body that are on less essential areas, the need to employ titanium would be massively diminished, in which case the implementation of composite armor such as ultra-high molecular weight polyethylene and Kevlar reinforced composites would be a more logical trade-off. These composites would be significantly lighter than other metal-based armor plating, while also providing extremely impressive ballistics protection. Ultra-high molecular weight polyethylene is after all employed for hard armors and soft armors currently, and anyone with even passing knowledge of personal body armors will be familiar with Kevlar and its applications. And while on the subject, that moves us quite nicely over to the soft armors of the ODST body armor. The softer materials that can be seen in between the armor plates that allow free mobility still have to provide the individual with ballistics protection. Now we already have armoured vest or stab vests that are made of Kevlar weave, extremely strong aramid fibres that are woven into a very tough material that is then layered, providing lightweight but flexible soft body armour panels. And again, even ultra-high molecular weight polyethylene can be woven into sheets and then multi-layered to provide this same level of protection. The issue, however, is that if you want to stop a bullet with multi-layers of soft armour, you have to have at least 15 layers of Kevlar or other similar soft armour materials. Now when we get to the point where we have that many layers of soft armours, they do start to get in the way of flexibility and mobility. So how do we get around this? Well, we could use something called a dilatant armour, otherwise known as a liquid armour or shear thickening fluid. It is relatively straightforward to create a shear thickening fluid by the application of polyethylene glycol and silica particles. When the nanoparticles of silica are mixed into a suspension of polyethylene glycol and then applied to a material such as Kevlar, the resulting ballistic properties of this Kevlar is markedly superior to Kevlar that is not given the shear thickening fluid due to the non-Newtonian characteristics of the fluid. When struck by a high-velocity projectile, the silica particles within the gel almost instantly realign within the suspension and resist shearing from each other. This gives the net effect of the material local to the impact of the bullet hardening to near 98% of the material hardness of the silica, relaxing almost immediately after the impact, and thus returning to a softened state. This allows only 3 sheets of Kevlar impregnated with shear thickening fluid to perform the same ballistic protection as 15 sheets of normal Kevlar. So the soft armour of the ODST armour can most definitely be done as well. But this isn't the only function of the soft suit of the ODST body armour. It also provides environment systems that allow thermal regulation of the individual wearing the armour. It can cool the occupant down in hot environments and warm them up in frigid environments. Now, can we do this with modern technology? Again, yes. High-altitude fighter pilots and astronauts frequently make use of skin-tight garments that have tubing woven throughout the suit, and then through this tubing can simply be ducted either warm water to keep the person warm or cold water to cool them down. Indeed, even I've created something similar to that with Project Mjolnir. I've simply simplified the process considerably, whereby the NASA suits have tubing ducted through the entirety of the suit. My prototype only makes use of ducting through the torso, specifically for the purposes of cooled water to be moved through, to aid in dropping the core body temperature of the individual. And when it comes to warming the body, research performed by the Navy SEALs indicated that keeping the core of the body warm alongside the hands and feet only enabled the body to self-thermoregulate without any issues, with no risk of frostbite happening to any of the extremities in between that aren't protected with a form of active heating. So in my prototype's case, we only have the tubing for cooling, and then in the torso we have 10 carbon fibre heating pads that use 5 volts to warm the torso, alongside a heating pad within the glove and heated insoles within the boots, then simply relying upon the body's capability of moving heat to where it is needed for the sakes of thermoregulation. This simplifies the system considerably. On top of this, the ODST bodysuit can also be something of a spacesuit. Now again, our modern technology shows that we can make spacesuits, except that generally speaking, EVA suits are very large and heavy and cumbersome. This is mainly because the suit itself has to protect the wearer from micrometeorites, radiation, extremes of heat and cold, as well as maintaining an atmosphere within the suit with necessary pressures to maintain and support life. Add to this a need to provide constant oxygen and be able to thermoregulate the wearer. These are a lot of very complex systems in very close proximity to one another. And while yes, admittedly the recent spacesuits from SpaceX, as demonstrated by Crew Dragon, are much slimmer and easier to move around in, these suits aren't specifically meant to be used for EVA maneuvers. They're more high-altitude flight suits and pressure suits. So would we be able to incorporate these kinds of systems into an ODST body armor without making it too bulky? Again, in short, yes. Contrary to popular belief, if the human body is exposed to the vacuum of space, it doesn't inflate to the point that it bursts like a balloon. In fact, generally speaking, although the body does swell somewhat due to the expansion of gases within the body, it is never sufficient to overcome the elastic rupture strength of the skin. Generally, exposure to the vacuum of space just makes you look more like a bodybuilder than a balloon. Don't get me wrong, it's hideously uncomfortable, but all around survivable. Early spacesuits actually looked into the idea of mechanical counterpressure. Current EVA spacesuits tend to maintain an atmosphere, an actual pressurized atmosphere, up to around the pressure of 4 psi. This is considered the lower threshold of which is required to maintain life and avoid the body swelling too dramatically, while also allowing the individual to breathe quite normally. But this isn't the only way to keep the body pressurized. Early mechanical counterpressure suits were literally just something approximating a compression layer for the body, with a sealed gasketed helmet that actually maintains an atmosphere for the individual to breathe. Indeed, there's recently been a resurgence of this design in MIT's use of the biosuit, which is a mechanical counterpressure suit that uses cables and memory metals used along lines of the body that don't particularly bend, flex or distort too severely during normal range of motion, used in tandem with a separately sealed helmet that maintains a breathable pressured atmosphere for the individual. The body itself is more than capable of holding all of its internal gases and the like within itself, with the mechanical counterpressure suit simply keeping the body in its normal proportions and avoiding swelling. Add to this a non-permeable membrane in the inner surface of the suit that actually maintains a seal between the vacuum of space and the wearer. An individual wearing the suit could be exposed to the vacuum of space and not swell up. So if you factored this into what we already have in regards to the Kevlar and shear thickening soft body armor, we already have a couple of the parameters of a spacesuit covered. We have protection from micrometeorites by the Kevlar and shear thickening fluid, and protection from the vacuum of space by the mechanical counterpressure suit. And we have the possibility of thermoregulating the body in the vacuum of space by use of the liquid cooling system and heating matrix granted by the carbon fiber pads. Add to this a composite such as Demron or even a metal microfoil, and you have a layer of material that can protect the individual from the radiation present in space. And that more or less ticks all of the boxes for what would be needed to be implemented to protect an individual in the vacuum of space. All of which are technologies that are available right now, and all of which could be very easily added together, the ODST BDU environment systems and space systems. But what about internally? The helmet is one of the most complex aspects of the entire suit because it has a huge array of technology crammed into a very small space. Again, referencing my own work, it is in fact possible to create a helmet with all of these systems in place. That's exactly what I've already done with Project Mjolnir. The ODST helmet has a visor that self-polarizes, it has weapons tracking, it has targeting systems, it has ammo tracking, it has smart scoping, it has the ability to use the visor system where it can identify friendly and enemy targets on the battlefield, as well as access to digital map systems, local communication systems and waypoints. Is it possible to have all of that implemented within the tight space tolerances of a helmet, alongside the implementation of an augmented or mixed reality HUD system? Again, in short, yes. One, because I've done it, and any functionality that hasn't been implemented is technology that already exists. The HUD system can be granted from a mixed reality headset as simple as the HoloLens, for example, which is what I was using for Project Mjolnir. The targeting reticle can be granted by tracking of two nodes on the rail of the weapon with a known distance between the two nodes, and then simply triangulating these positions and displaying a reticle on the HUD that moves with the expected trajectory of the weapon, even changing the apparent distance of the reticle from the user in three-dimensional space based on where the target is. On top of this, a very simple simplification of this system would be to use an infrared laser and have the HUD be able to see that laser line using the cameras built on board. ODSTs also make use of smart scoping, which is a function that allows an individual to see through the scope of the weapon in a full display mode over the HUD. This technology already exists in one way or another already on the battlefield, but again it's as simple as mounting a camera onto the weapon and having that camera connect wirelessly to the heads-up display and then being able to display that camera view in a zoomed aspect ratio on the HUD. Tracking of the weapon that you're holding in your hand at any given time can be granted by the simple application of radio frequency identification chips, or RFID chips. You simply program the identity of the weapon into an RFID chip, and then when the individual picks it up, it makes contact with a reader that's in the palm of the hand, which then instructs the heads-up display what weapon is being held. Tracking of ammo can be granted by something as simple as a distance sensor on the follower of the rounds within the magazine. And as each bullet is fired, so the follower will change its distance from the base of the magazine by a known integer, allowing a very simple computational system to calculate exactly how many rounds have been fired, or indeed how many rounds are in a magazine that's just been loaded. The helmet's visor can be polarized. This can be granted by something very similar to e-paper. E-paper works by having tiny particles in between an anode and a cathode, and these particles are charged. On one side of the particle is white and the other side is black, and when a certain charge is passed through this particle, it will change its orientation based on what charge is put through, displaying either the black or white side out to the user. In this same manner, we could use particles that are clear on one side and mirrored on the other side, and simply putting the charge through would allow it either to be side on, allowing light to pass through seamlessly and thus being able to make the visor appear transparent, or activating the visor and allowing those particles to rotate through 90 degrees, displaying their mirrored face outward, thereby rendering the visor as mirrored. And finally, the rather impressive visor system that the ODST sport that allow them to identify friends and enemies on the battlefield is very similar to a recent innovation in night vision goggles in the form of the Enhanced Night Vision Goggle Binocular, or ENVG-B. Traditional night goggles had that ghostly green hue, which is the traditional green colour of night vision technology, and was chosen simply because it was the easiest to look at for prolonged periods of time in the dark. The brightened images often lacked contrast and were very noisy, which made it extraordinarily difficult for users to understand what they were actually seeing on the battlefield, which, for a soldier, is a big problem. But the NVG system uses medium wave infrared and long wave infrared layered in a fusion night vision mode. Fusion vision systems have offered a number of different imaging modes, including the fused night vision with thermal overlay, night vision only, thermal only, and in NVG's case, a special fusion mode called Outline, which overlays the medium and long wave infrared signatures on top of each other, highlighting the parts where they overlay, giving the appearance of outlined figures in the darkness. Tally all of this up with basic communications gear, ventilation systems and breathing systems built into the helmet, and you've basically got a fully functioning ODST helmet. Speaking of which, this episode featured heavily references directly made from my own development of Project Mjolnir, a crowdfunder where I'm going about actually building real-life Mjolnir with technology currently available to us on the market, as close to law accurate as is practically possible. There is a huge array of things that I need to update you guys on, and they're all lined up to come out in due course. But the update specifically relating to this video is that I'm now formally announcing that development of a real-life ODST armor has begun. And in the same vein that we were currently developing Project Mjolnir, we're going to be diversifying and developing a real-life ODST armor as well. More details will follow on the specifics. And in addition to this, we've moved over and begun Phase 2 of Project Mjolnir, as well as activating a new subcell, so to speak, of Project Mjolnir, where we will now be looking into developing different modular Mjolnir helmet variants with all of the systems built in that we have plans to make available for you this year. If you're a cosplayer, a lore fanatic, or just mad about Halo, you'll be able to pick up a Mjolnir helmet with many of the systems that are featured in Project Mjolnir so far fully integrated and functional within. Again, more details to follow, and until then, thanks for watching. If you're new here and liked what you saw, go ahead and hit that like button and hit the subscribe button while you're at it so you don't miss my future uploads. Links are in the description to get connected and jump into the Discord community with me, and if you really love the content I'm making, consider supporting the channel over on Patreon for tons of awesome perks. Pop your comments down below if you have an idea of what I should cover next, and hang around for the end of the video for other suggested videos you might be interested in. Huge shoutouts to my patrons: Spartan10148, the Metarch of my installation; Falcon, Prophet, Phantom, Thomas, Mikhail and Irrefutable Justice, my monitors; Andrew, Cameron, Darian, Flaming Halo, Madness, Masked Owl, Michael, Spartan0137, The Cave Potato, Uwu Master and Wolf Eclipse, my sub-monitors; my growing fleet of Strato Sentinels; my ever-vigilant Enforcers; and all the other awesome patrons that are helping to support the channel in a big way. Huge shout out to Todd Morrison for keeping the installation powered with that glorious vacuum energy. Much love to you all, take it easy everyone, and find peace in the domain.